Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, today we are going to talk about chapters 13 through 26 of The Stand. So chapter 13, we are back with Stu Redman, and he has been poked and prodded so much. They're studying him at the plague center. A Dr. Dick Dietz goes in and he tells Stu that he's not contagious, but pretty much everyone else that went into quarantine with him has died. So there are no real answers given, and Stu is getting agitated and annoyed that he gets absolutely nothing from these people. So while Dietz is in the room and he's saying that he's not very concerned because they have a guinea pig who's breathing the same air as Stu, Dietz isn't dressed up in a hazmat suit and all that stuff. So what Stu does to him is hilarious. He coughs and pretends that he might indeed be sick, and Dietz just instantly freaks out because, you know, this thing is very, very serious and no one wants to catch it. So Stu does have that little moment where he is back in charge and he likes it. And Dietz kind of deserved it. I feel like the way that he was treating Stu, they want information, they want to study him. I'm guessing that a lot of this is against Stu's personal rights, so, let him have a little bit of fun. And then that night, Stu dreams of a cornfield and red eyes glowing in the cornfield. Chapter 14, we find out that Dietz is really a colonel, and he is kind of masquerading as a lowly doctor person at this plague center in order to kind of, in a way, not really befriend Stu, but play nice with him so that he can extract more from him. Because obviously Stu had that issue with the other doctor who was kind of uppity with him, and Dietz thinks that the best way to go about it is to just kind of suck up to Stu. They are still expecting Stu to get sick at some point. In their military papers, they refer to him by his code name, which is Prince. Chapter 15. A nurse who is working at this plague center where Stu and his quarantine buddies are, all of a sudden she starts sneezing, and she completely... See, no one in here seems to connect that, maybe I've got it. Maybe I need to be more careful. Maybe I need to excuse myself so that I don't infect other people. And she even passes by a sign that says, any sickness that you feel, make sure you report it to your supervisor so that actions can be taken. This is a very serious matter. So she's sneezing. She completely does not connect in her brain, even though you would think that these people would be excessively attuned to such things. No, she doesn't even think about it, and she goes about her business and starts infecting people. And she starts infecting people who are going home. She starts infecting people who are still in the facility. This is a disaster. Chapter 16, we break away from the people that we've already met and established as characters, and we are introduced to Poke and Lloyd. These guys are real jerks. They met at a work farm, the Brownville minimum security station in Nevada, and they both got out kind of a month apart, so near the same time they got out, and they made plans to work together and to, run drugs and guns and all this bad stuff. So when they both are free, they start going on a killing spree, and they have a whole bunch of drugs and guns in their car that they stole and killed the owner for this car. They've already killed 6 people. They've crossed several state lines. I think they are now in Arizona, and they go into a gas station and there's a huge shootout. Very bloody, very graphic description of a shootout. And Poke dies, but Lloyd gets captured. So he's hauled off by the Arizona police. Chapter 17. We are back to Starkey, and he's one of the military guys who knows about Project Blue, and he is the one who is observing the monitors of the Project Blue facility and all the dead people that are inside. So he's running interference because he has found out that the press is starting to get wind of Project Blue. So they have 10 states that have traces of the virus showing up, and it's just exponentially increasing every day. So Starkey actually calls in a hit on some press people. There's a reporter and a photographer who are about to let the public know about this Project Blue. They are brutally gunned down in the road by two kind of nondescript government agents. Chapter 18, we return to Nick Andros and Sheriff Baker. Their little saga. They managed to get the bullies who beat Nick up, except for Ray Booth. And he was the kind of ringleader and the brother-in-law of the sheriff. So Nick feels a little weird because he's caused problems through no fault of his own, but he's made things a little awkward between, having the relationship between the sheriff's wife and the person who was most responsible for his getting beaten up. And when he goes to dinner with the sheriff and his wife at their house, he feels bad. And the wife, Jane Baker, she's very understanding, and she makes him feel very comfortable and says, "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. My brother's a jerk. It can't be helped." Nick eats dinner with them. Sheriff doesn't have much of an appetite. He is kind of cloudy and just not with it. And Jane says, "Hey, you need to stay home. You're very sick, and I don't like the look of this. You need to relax and call it a night." And the sheriff is like, "I can't. I've got men in the jail. I can't just leave them there without anyone. I don't have a deputy right now." And she says, "Well, you're going to deputize Nick." So even though Nick is not a citizen of the town, and even though he is a complete stranger basically to these people, and he's unable to talk or hear, which puts him at a severe disadvantage in case anything were to happen, and I'm guessing it would be an extreme liability, the sheriff says, "Well, I don't really have another choice. I feel so horrible. I don't feel good at all." So he deputizes Nick, and he gives him instructions on what to do. Nick says he'll go and keep an eye on things at the sheriff's station, and he will write out his autobiography. Nick writes up his autobiography, which is really interesting. He was born in Nebraska in 1968. He was born deaf and mute, so he did not have those abilities and then lose them. He just never had them to begin with. His dad died right before he was born, like months before he was born, and his mother died in 1977. So after that, he was sent to an orphanage where he was very surly and unhappy with his lot in life. He couldn't express himself well. He got picked on, and it was not easy for him. He needed to learn to read and write, but that's just virtually impossible unless you have the right circumstances and the right people teaching you. Nick is sent to the orphanage, and he needs to learn to get along, and a guy named Rudy comes in, and he takes an interest in Nick because Rudy is also deaf and mute. So he teaches Nick, and they have a real breakthrough moment, and it's very sweet, and you love the fact that it's a feel-good story. It's a feel-good story, Nick's life. And then the orphanage ran out of funding, or something happened, and Nick couldn't stay there anymore. So he was only 16. He kind of ran away because he didn't want to go anywhere else. He wanted to just, bum around and make money and be by himself and just pretty much exist like a I won't hurt you, you won't hurt me kind of way of life. So everyone in the town is getting sick, and Nick, the next day, he goes out into the street and sees the doctor coming, the same doctor who checked him out and make sure he was okay from after his attack. He flags Dr. Soames down because the prisoners are getting sick, his prisoners. And Dr. Soames tells him that Sheriff Baker has died, and Jane, the wife, is sick. Dr. Soames says, quote, "I've signed 12 death certificates in the last 12 hours, page 150, which is highly unusual. And he said that there are soldiers who are on the outskirts of town preventing people from, they've kind of basically silently quarantined the town. So there's no real escape. But Dr. Soames suggests that maybe Nick would maybe want to get out of there. Quote, "Will you try to leave town? I think you could if you went by the fields," page 153. But Nick decides to stay, and one of the prisoners, Vince Hogan, dies. Chapter 19, Larry's mom is sick. She has a cold, and she calls in to work. Larry goes out and kind of hangs out in Times Square for the day, and he calls a friend out in California, and he hears that Captain Trips is kind of a big deal, and one of his friends is in the hospital with it. So Larry returns to the apartment, and his mother is really sick, like really sick. She's burning up like crazy, and she's delirious, and she doesn't seem to know what's going on, and she is too weak to even open the door. He has to break the door down, break the lock. He calls the hospital, and he just keeps getting a recording that repeats and repeats, saying that there's no one to help right now. You know, it's not a good sign that the hospital is not taking calls. And Larry has this kind of unbidden, cruel thought, quote, "How bad is this going to screw up my plans? How many things am I going to have to change around?" Page 161. It gives us another little insight into Larry's character, and we know that he's a good guy, but he has these, these conflicts within himself. And he is selfish, and he is, as his mother said, a taker. Chapter 20, Franny has moved out. She has decided that she can no longer live with her parents. She needs some space. She needs to get out of the town that she lives in. Quote, "She knew that nobody was going to make her wear a scarlet letter, but she also knew that for her mind to finish convincing her nerves of that fact, a break with Algonquin was necessary." Page 164. So she's going to take an apartment out of town with some friends. She and Jesse have kind of broken up, mostly, like 99% broken up, and she has decided that she is going to have the baby. She still doesn't know if she's going to keep it or if she's going to give it away. Her dad calls to tell her that her mother, Carla, is sick, like very sick, and he called an ambulance to come get her, but apparently the 2 ambulances that the town has are out on calls, and he needs to be added to the list, which alarms him greatly because, how often do ambulances make runs? They have 2 ambulances, and the fact that both of them are unavailable is very unnerving. And when the ambulance finally does arrive, there are already 6 people in there when they load Carla in. Chapter 21, Stu Redman is now in Stovington, Vermont, and you guys might remember Stovington from The Shining. Jack worked at Stovington Prep. That's where he taught. And they moved Stu from Atlanta all the way up to Vermont. Quote, "Being under detection was bad. Being under detection and being expendable, that was very bad." Page 172. So Stu starts contemplating escape because he thinks that most of the people are probably dead that he entered quarantine with, and the doctors that were treating him at the old facility. He is expendable, and it is a dangerous situation. Chapter 22, Starkey and Creighton are discussing Stu's case, and they, are impressed that he is not sick. They discuss the fact that at some point during his observations and tests and whatnot, the doctors actually injected him with the Project Blue virus, and he killed the virus. They don't know how he did it, and they don't really have enough time to use that information to make a cure, which is unfortunate. He told them they were giving him a sedative at one point, and they actually put the virus right into him, and he managed to fight it off. And Starkey goes out to the Project Blue facility that he's been monitoring, looking at his monitors all the time, and he goes around and he inspects the dead people that he has been seeing on the TV screens, and he walks around, gets a good lay of the land, feels bad about this whole thing, and he ends up killing himself inside the facility with his gun. Chapter 23, we meet Randall Flagg, and Randall Flagg is such an interesting character. Randall Flagg is, quote, a tall man of no age in faded pegged jeans and a denim jacket, page 180. And I always took him to be like a god of chaos and hatred. He's like an evil puppeteer. He always knows the right things to do to push people's buttons. He is always an instigator, and he is always gleeful and evil. His aliases always have the initials RF. We know that he's from Nebraska, and he's such an insightful little shit. He causes irreparable damage, and then he escapes at the very last minute and leaves everyone else to deal with the fallout. Quote, and later, when a few tattered remnants of the group were swept up, all they knew was there had been someone else associated with the group. Maybe someone important, maybe a hanger-on, a man of no age, a man called the Walkin' Dude, or sometimes the Boogeyman, page 184. And he, at this point in time, feels like he's going to be reborn and come out of like a great conflict. Quote, he closed his eyes, his hot face turning up slightly to the dark sky, which was prepared to receive the dawn. He concentrated, smiled. The dusty, run-down heels of his boots began to rise off the road, an inch, 2, 3 inches. The smile broadened into a grin. Now he was a foot up, and 2 feet off the ground, he hung steady over the road with a little dust blowing beneath him. And I find that imagery to be so chilling and creepy and intriguing. Chapter 24, we are back with Lloyd, the guy who was arrested in Arizona, and they've called him the baby-faced, unrepentant killer. His lawyer is Andy Devins, and Lloyd and his lawyer start conspiring that the way to win his court case is to make it seem as though Polk was in charge of everything, and that Lloyd was afraid for his life, and he just kind of went along because he was scared. Chapter 25, Nick is trying to take care of Jane Baker, and he dreams of a cornfield. 2 of his prisoners have died at this point, and he sets the last one free. When he watches TV at the Baker house, there are news reports of the superflu epidemic, and there are claims that it's getting under control. And they are speaking of a vaccine that will be available next week. Jane dies, and Nick dresses her in the white dress that she wants to be buried in, and he carries her to the funeral home. I very much picture Michael Myers when he's carrying Annie. I just have this image of Nick carrying dead Jane Baker down the street to the funeral home, and it reminds me of Michael and Annie. Chapter 26 is a very intense chapter. In Boston, a newsroom rebels, and they overthrow the guards who have been making them report about cures and how things aren't so bad, and there are vaccines on the way, and just drink fluids and all this stuff. They've been under duress, having to report this stuff practically at gunpoint. So then they stage a little rebellion, and they start showing clips of bodies being dumped, like tons and tons of bodies being dumped into barges and being like pitchforked off of convoy trucks into these barges, and just all these people with guns, and it's just not what they've been saying has been happening. Quote, for the last 7 days, this broadcast facility has been under guard by men purporting to be National Guardsmen, page 213. There's a small newspaper guy who's also printed up some stories, and he's distributed those. There are people who are blowing up news stations to prevent the truth from coming out. There's a guy doing a radio talk show, and some army men come in and tell him to stop broadcasting or they'll shoot him, and he won't, so they kill him, and then the soldiers turn on the guy in charge and they kill him. It's just extreme chaos all over. The army people are killing people, radio stations, like I said, are getting blown up, and people are getting shot at, and there are televised executions by some military men who have kind of gone crazy, and they start like raffling off who they're going to kill kind of thing, and then another faction of the military comes in and wipes them out. They wipe each other out. It's just very chaotic and a very, very tense chapter. And that is where we will leave it this week. We will start chapter 27 next week.